Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a pretty fascinating case file. Imagine, if you will, an enterprise network as this heavily guarded digital castle. But out there in the shadows, adversaries are constantly poking around, looking for a way in. So we're going to put on our cyber detective hats and investigate Domain 2 of the CompTIA Security Plus certification. We'll be diving deep into threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations. We're going to look at the criminals, their weapons, the cracks in our walls, and ultimately how we lock the whole place down. So, here is our detective's briefing board for today's investigation. First, we'll meet the cyber suspects. Second, we're going to look at their methods of attack. Third, we'll identify the weak links in our systems. And finally, we'll wrap up by building your defense to secure the enterprise. All right, let's jump right into step 1, meeting the cyber suspects and understanding their motivations.
Picture this spectrum of attackers. On one far end, you've got the Advanced Persistent Threat, or APT. These are often nation-backed entities. They are highly funded, incredibly sophisticated, and their entire goal is to break into a system, stay completely hidden for a long time, and quietly siphon off data. On the exact opposite end, you have the unskilled attacker. These are individuals who really lack technical prowess. They aren't writing their own code. Instead, they're just buying off-the-shelf hacking tools from the dark web. Honestly, kind of like ordering from a fast food drive-thru. But don't let the term unskilled fool you. Using a pre-made ransomware kit can still cause absolutely massive disruptions to an unsecured network.
So what's the psychology here? Why do they actually do it? Well, financial gain is obviously a massive driver. Think ransomware payouts and credit card fraud. Then you've got espionage, which is usually conducted by those APTs we just talked about, looking to steal state secrets or intellectual property. We also see hacktivism, where attackers deface websites to promote a specific political or social ideology. And sometimes it's just pure revenge. Actually, there's a wild anecdote from the source text. Back in 2021, an ex-employee of a school in Leicestershire, UK, managed to change the passwords of the staff, locking everyone out of their IT systems simply as revenge for getting fired. It really proves that the threat isn't always some faceless hacker in a hoodie. Sometimes it's just an insider with a grudge.
Moving right along to step 2, their methods of attack, the modus operandi.
One of the most critical concepts in cybersecurity is that the weakest link isn't always a piece of software or a misconfigured firewall. Very often, it's us. Hacking the human is all about social engineering. Attackers manipulate our psychology. They appeal to our curiosity, our greed, or even just our natural desire to be helpful to trick us into literally handing over the keys to the castle. And this psychological manipulation takes a few really common forms. Phishing is your classic deceptive email, right? Maybe claiming to be from your bank, urging you to click a malicious link. But attackers have seriously evolved. Now we have smishing, which uses SMS text messages to drop those malicious links right onto your smartphone. And vishing, which uses voice calls, where an attacker might actually impersonate a tech support agent or even law enforcement. Think about your own daily habits for a second. If you got an urgent text saying your bank account was locked, would your first instinct be to tap the link? Because that instinct is exactly what they're preying on.
Now, if they can't just trick you into handing over a password, they'll trick you into installing malware. Enter the Trojan. Just like the ancient Greeks sneaking into the city of Troy by hiding inside that giant wooden horse, this malware completely disguises itself as legitimate software. You think you're downloading a helpful utility or some fun free game, but once it's inside your system, the Trojan quietly sets up a hidden backdoor. This bypasses your authentication entirely and lets the attacker just come and go as they please from halfway across the world.
But while a Trojan needs a VIP invite from you to get in, a worm is an entirely different beast. A worm is malware that self-propagates. It doesn't need a host file, and it doesn't need you to click anything once it's inside the network. It spreads incredibly fast, independently replicating itself and jumping from machine to machine, honestly much like a highly contagious virus in the real world. Because of this aggressive replication, worms eat up massive amounts of network bandwidth and can easily grind entire enterprise systems to a complete halt. And to wrap up our rapid-fire look at malware, we've got the logic bomb. These are unbelievably stealthy. A logic bomb is essentially a digital time bomb buried deep within a system. It lies completely dormant, totally undetected, until a very specific condition is met. That could be a certain date on the calendar, or maybe when a specific user logs into the network. But once triggered, the bomb goes off, deleting files or corrupting massive amounts of data. They are very often the go-to tool for those disgruntled insiders looking for extortion or revenge long after they've actually left the building. All right, let's hit step 3, identifying the weak links and figuring out their points of entry. Criminals are out there exploiting glaring vulnerabilities every single day. When vendors release security updates, failing to patch those operating systems basically leaves known holes wide open. On the website, attackers manipulate backend databases with SQL injections, or they inject malicious scripts into web pages via cross-site scripting or XSS. And at the infrastructure level, legacy systems that aren't even supported by their vendors anymore, combined with unnecessarily open service ports, those act quite literally as unlocked doors right into your network. But what happens when the software creator doesn't even know the vulnerability exists? Well, that is a zero-day vulnerability. It's a secret passage discovered by hackers before the developers have any clue it's there. Because it's totally unknown to the good guys, there are absolutely zero patches and zero known defenses. It provides unrestricted access, which makes it one of the most dangerous, highly prized weapons in an attacker's entire arsenal. And these zero-day vulnerabilities? They can build into some of the most famous cyber events in history. Take the Stuxnet virus, for example. This story reads like a thrilling spy movie. Stuxnet was this incredibly sophisticated worm that utilized not one, not two, but 4 different zero-day vulnerabilities. It originated around 2005 and successfully infiltrated the Siemens industrial control systems at an Iranian nuclear facility. Amazingly, it went completely unnoticed until 2007 and wasn't even officially identified until 2010. For years, it secretly monitored and then physically degraded the nuclear centrifuges, all while sending back fake data to the operators saying everything was totally fine. It is a really chilling reminder of the raw power of advanced persistent threats utilizing zero-day exploits. Which brings us to our final section, building your defense and securing the perimeter. Let's break down some core mitigation strategies to lock things down. First up, segmentation. This just means dividing your network into smaller, isolated segments. That way, if an attacker breaches one specific area, they can't easily move laterally over to the rest of the network. Isolation takes this a step further by physically or logically cutting off your most critical assets from the main network entirely. Then we have patching, and this is mandatory. Applying regular updates closes those known software vulnerabilities before anyone can exploit them. Finally, encryption scrambles your sensitive data into unreadable ciphertext. So even if an attacker does manage to steal the files, the information is completely useless to them without that decryption key. Sometimes the best defense is just a really good trick. Deception technology literally flips the script on attackers. A great example of this is the DNS sinkhole, which is playfully known as the black hole of the internet. If an attacker or a piece of malware tries to connect to a known malicious domain, the DNS sinkhole intercepts that request and deliberately redirects them to a fake, dead-end IP address. You're essentially tricking the attacker into walking into an empty, locked room, neutralizing the threat while simultaneously alerting your security team that someone is poking around. Because at the end of the day, security isn't just one magic tool you buy. It's a continuous process of hardening. You have to actively transform a vulnerable system into an impenetrable fortress. That means always changing default passwords, since those are public knowledge and literally the easiest way in. You also need to install solid endpoint protection to monitor and block threats right at the device level. And disable any unused ports and protocols. If you aren't using a door, you should probably brick it up, right? Finally, remove unnecessary software to shrink your overall attack surface. The less bloatware you have running, the fewer vulnerabilities you expose. And that essentially closes this case file on Domain 2. We've profiled the cyber suspects, examined their tools, exposed the structural weaknesses in our networks, and laid out the blueprints for a rock-solid defense. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave it with one final provocative thought. Are your digital doors truly locked, or are they just closed? Because understanding these concepts is only the very first step. Rigorously applying them is what actually keeps the adversaries out. Keep investigating, keep questioning your own security posture, and keep learning. Thanks for joining me today, and stay secure out there.